All right, today's been an interesting day, but I want to try and pass on some wisdom to you. And as with all things with Photoshop, there's more than one way to do this. So I'm going to take you through several ways and hopefully teach you a lot in the process. I'm going to start with this one. And this one, again, I'm using a selection tool. And I use the quick selection tool. I change my brush size. So again, the quick selection tool is here. I changed my brush size here to make it a large brush and just basically made sure that I had the entire image selected. I also have this image which I rotated so that they would match. And the steps that I took you through was if you hit Control and click, what you're doing is selecting and masking. Now that's also up here. They both work and they both do the same thing. And what it's doing is it's giving you a chance to polish up your selection and see any mistakes along the way. Now I see a few. And when you're done, you can click OK. I'll show you a little bit more on that later. Right now I'm just going to click up the fix the two things that I just saw. And check it again. I think I got it. All right. Now with this, what we want to have happen is we want to push this button right here, which is the button that will get us started on. Let me hover on it so you can see it. Add a layer mask. Now there's got to be more than one way to do this, but I'm going to use that because what it does is gives us a mask right here. And if I do that correctly, then I'm going to be able to use that mask and apply it to the background image. I also want to use this button right here, which is creating a new fill or adjustment layer. And that just gives me a solid color gradient background, something that I could use for my background layer. And it'll show up here, but I want to drag it to the bottom so that I don't see transparent space. The next step is to take this image and bring it over. I'm going to make sure that it's unlocked. Hit Control C and bring it back and hit Control V. And I want to make sure that that layer is on top. Now the next step, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get this mask to copy over to this layer. What you have to do to make that happen is right click on it and you'll see this option here, Add Mask to Selection. And when you click on that, you'll see that this shows back up. Now at this point, you want to switch back to the top layer because that's where you actually want to apply it. And then again, back to this button right here where you're adding a layer mask, and you'll see that that copied the mask here and here. What that did for you is created a mask that works together, and both images are masked identically. At this point, you have some options with the type of blend mode that you're doing. And remember, when you're dealing with opacity, which is the amount of how clear the object is, how much you can see through. Just remember that you want to focus on one layer at a time, or you can change the blending mode, which basically just changes the way in which the blending looks depending on the opacity. Some are more pronounced, some are a little bit more subtle. So those two things right there will help you blend to the appropriate level. You also can unlink these two things so that when you're using a move tool, you should be able to take, and that's not exactly what I want, I'm going to step back, take the image and replace the image so that it's overlaying the way that you want to, being careful not to miss an edge here. That's one way. The other way, let me get out of that, and I was trying some work here, let me try it again. Just Control right click, Control click, edit. Okay, now I'm a little bit stuck. Step back. What I want to do is deselect. So I'm stuck in selection tool, which was right here. Select subject. Yes. Now, as I said before, there's always more than one way to select an object, and in this time I ended up selecting the subject using that button right there. It didn't do exactly what I want to, and what I want to do is get back a little bit more of this hair. I'm going to ignore some of those because what ends up happening is it ends up taking everything, and that's not what I want. So I just want to show you a little bit more about what you could do with masking. Now, if I right-click on this image and I select and mask, this is a good opportunity. Again, it's not perfect. I should do a little bit of work there to clear that up, but what I wanted to show you was this tool right here, which is called the Refine Edge Brush tool. And what that does, like magic, I'm going to make the tool size a little bit bigger, is it deletes the background but tries to retain some of the edges of the hair. And again, you could spend hours on this. I'm not going to, but you may have some edges that this would work really well for. And if you spend some time really working on the edge and preparing your image, you can get back some of that detail so that the blending looks a little bit smoother. It's kind of more of an advanced thing, but it's useful to know that it's there. I'm going to go ahead and make that work. All right, so then I hit OK. Now, I have a selection. I'm going to try, this is another way. I'm going to go ahead and layer this versus a copy, with a copy. Because when you take a background image, in this case I'm going to take this one, again, Command C, and go back and Command V. If you right-click on that image, you'll see an option here that lets you create a clipping mask. And what that does is it meters it to the bottom. And if I remove this layer, you'll see that it's done the same thing, just a little bit easier. So if it's above and I create the clipping mask, it's basically linking, and you see that little arrow there. It shows that this mask is clipped to this selection. And again, the end result is if I give it a background, a solid color background, let's just go with something simple like white. And I make sure that that background's on the bottom layer, or at least below that. Then I have the same effect. And again, go back to my top layer. I can bring the opacity down to get that same effect. So that's two different ways to do it. Plus I introduced the cleanup tool. Now the last way, I'm going to use these two images for my last one. Again, I'm going to try this and just see what happens if I say select subject. My guess is it's going to figure it out right away because there's very defined edges. Doing a little bit of processing. There's my subject. And I'm going to go ahead and select that, layer it via a copy, take this copy out, and make sure that I put a solid color gradient in the background, give it a very simple white color, make sure that that is below at least my layer, but on top of my background. And then I'm going to take this image and I'm going to copy that image by hitting Command C and going back here and hitting Command V. And what I discovered just by watching what other people did was this. Now there's a few less things you could do. It might be more challenging for me to move copy layers over, but because this layer has a solid white background and it knows what you want to do, when you choose the blending option for this layer, if you choose screen, it's going to know right away what you're trying to do. Now I didn't quite get them to match, but you'll see that it automatically uses this edge to define where it is. And if I'd lined them up a little bit better, it would have worked well where this effect was layered throughout the entire subject. And I can bring that down and reveal more details from the subject from the original layer. And what I learned was that some of these do it, like color dodge, lighter color, lighten, and some of these layers don't. So if I try another one, like just a normal, you'll see that it doesn't use the same edge. But basically there's three good ways that you can use to get that effect, and each one of them works, and there's a lot of tools along the way that can help you really do a good job on it. So I hope this has been helpful. Thanks for being patient, and again, I plan on putting a tutorial where you can skip to all three methods and not have to watch the entire thing.